more in just the creative space. As a filmmaker, my brother was so passionate about Bitcoin, as you can tell. He just kept telling me about it. He wouldn't shut up. And it started as a smaller project. We just wanted to make a little documentary for, to basically educate people about Bitcoin. And he kind of asked me to help him, as someone who could, shoot it. And we started small, but as Bitcoin grew, we realized we had the opportunity to make a much bigger film, so we jumped on it. And last year was just insane. All the traveling, and it was an independent project, and we did our best to follow the story, and yeah. Sure, up at the top.
I think we've just started. Will there be a sequel?
That's a great question. I've actually got that question a couple times. I'm not going to say no, but I will say that I do believe that last year was truly a great year to capture really the energy of the transitioning years of Bitcoin from some of the early adopters in the space who were really in over their head to now we're seeing a lot more finance-based people in the space who are trying to find how it can fit into the regulatory systems of the various governments around the world. So even though there's a lot of fascinating stories now in the space and there's a lot more going on a bigger level, I do believe from an entertainment standpoint, we're really happy with what we captured, and that's something that I don't think can be recreated.
So what did you find the most memorable experience during this project?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think the San Jose conference that happened, it was the first Bitcoin Foundation conference, over 1,000 people, as you saw in the film. There was just such an energy there. I think everyone was just so excited because the price had reached a point where, there were millionaires were being made, and there were a lot of people that were lobbying for Bitcoin, but from various backgrounds. It was the first time that we had kind of a balancing act of the old school libertarians and tech guys just computer programmers who wanted to promote Bitcoin because of the technology aspect. But then we were also seeing a lot of financial, investors coming into the space as well. So it was an awesome energy to be there and really see people from all over the world come together at that exciting time. Sure, right here.
What happened to the guy that was in house arrest at the end of the movie?
So he's still waiting for his sentence. I'll give you a little tidbit. I'm actually still friends with Charlie. He's a great guy, and I'm a firm believer that what happened to him was a big part into the fact that he just was in way over his head. I don't think he knew that Bitcoin was going to get that kind of adoption that quickly. And anyway, he is still waiting for his sentence to see how it's all going to play out. But right now he's trying to cut a deal, and hopefully if all goes well, he won't get many years in prison, but we'll see. I think the verdict should be coming within the next few months, though. Yeah, at the top there.
There's tons of parallels basically between Bitcoin now and basically the gold rush back then, where gold is basically becoming currency, even gold mining and everything. And kind of the government gained control over the gold as well, like setting up gold reserves to use as a backup for their money. What prevents them from trying to get basically like buying Bitcoin now, creating a Bitcoin reserve that they can then use to regulate the value of a current Bitcoin compared to their currency by really leasing some or buying some for their currency?
Sure, and that's a tough question, and one that I don't know if I can fully answer. But I will say that I think people have said, well, what if governments create their own version of Bitcoin? And I think the problem with that is that then it once again has a central point. It's a government-controlled currency. So what makes Bitcoin so fascinating and so desirable is that it's purely organic and it is distributed. Yes, I think we'll see governments, and we're seeing it right now, decide whether or not they want to support Bitcoin and try to work with it within their regulatory systems, and others have already even banned it. But I think overall, the question will be in these upcoming years, how much will Bitcoin get pushed underground, or will it really reach a network effect and become a mainstream currency globally? And that's a question I don't think anyone can answer at this point. It's still so early. It's such an experimental stage. Yes, we're 5 years in, but no one knows. And I'm a firm believer that if you look at like what email did to the way we transact, or what Facebook did to social media, it just makes sense that digital currency is next. Whether or not Bitcoin is going to be the one that survives, we'll see. But the technology behind Bitcoin is not going anywhere, and that's just my own personal belief.
I think there was a question over here.
Yes.
How can we donate some Bitcoin?
You can go to our website if you'd like to donate to our film, BitcoinDoc.com. And we do have pre-orders for the film on iTunes. It comes out on October 10th globally, where it's getting translated into 21 languages. It's a big priority of ours to really, educate the world and show people what we can about Bitcoin. So, and the lady up at the top there, I know you raised your hand. Sorry about that.
What was your biggest learning out of this journey?
I'll let these guys chime in on that one as well, because I feel like they're kind of hanging out here. But yeah, for me, I think it's what I touched on earlier. Yes, I have a small tech background, just like the average guy. This film forced me into a world that I didn't really know even existed. I had to study so much as we were shooting, and everything was happening so quickly that it was a real challenge to stay on top of the current and relevant stories that would also make a film. Many documentaries, you go back, or many documentaries, you're capturing a story many documentaries, you're retelling a story that's already happened. So through interviews or through, your reading, you can retell it. With our film, I think the toughest challenge was not knowing what the story was as we were filming it. It was unraveling in front of us. So to always be traveling to the next place and hoping that it somehow fit in a linear way into the film was the biggest challenge. And let me let Nate and Ashley have it.
Hi, my name's Nathan. I was one of the editors on the film. For me, the thing that I learned the most was probably when it came to the financial systems, and when the depression kind of came, or the economic crisis came back in 2008, kind of made me rethink about money, and it kind of made me sad to think about how we're doing things. So Bitcoin's actually restored my faith back into a future for money, and so that's my personal thing that I've taken from the film.
My name's Ashley. I was a co-producer, and I'm also the wife of the director, Nicolas. I learned my husband is a bit of a gambler. And when he came to me back 2 years ago, I guess, and said, let's invest in this thing called Bitcoin. My brother's talking a lot about it. We should really invest in it. I said, no, this is crazy. I've never heard of that. We're throwing money down the toilet. And he convinced me, and we invested a little. Now, you can imagine, he never lets me forget that we should have invested way more. So I have to trust him now on more financial decisions. I think I learned that.
Sure, you have the top.
I have another one. I think at some point you raised a very important question in the movie about the challenges of the system relying on having government-based bank accounts. Do you think that, or can you see the way how the system could in principle function without having any accounts tied to government in any of the steps for the transaction?
So that's a great question, and my personal belief is that yes, of course it can function, but I don't think it can reach a large-scale mainstream adoption if that were the case. Governments will have to work with Bitcoin if we wanted to see it reach a tipping point or a network effect. And I think a perfect example of why that's true is because that's how Bitcoin started. When it first started, it was just a small group of programmers that were using it that were using it on their own, aside from governments, as just a fun, experiment. It was just tokens that people were sending across the internet that really had very, very little or no value. Originally Bitcoins were trading for fractions of a penny. And it wasn't until more and more people started to adopt them and use them that all of a sudden it kind of pierced the public consciousness, and people said, hey, wait a minute, this can function as a form of a digital currency. And then, the price started to go up, and one thing led to another, and now we're seeing governments who need to find whether or not they want to work with Bitcoin, and that's what I think will drive whether or not falls underground or whether or not it becomes really a much larger financial system globally.
I think it's important to keep in mind too with Bitcoin, because it's open source, that if the people who are us don't like the way that Bitcoin's being managed, or if it starts going in a direction we don't like, that same protocol or principle can be taken and put onto a completely new platform. So you already see there's tons of digital currencies that are literally just like based directly off of that code, and just with some small changes to try and implement the things that they think are better or improving on Bitcoin. So that'll answer that question a little bit too.
Yes, right here.
Do you foresee the future that I can use in my actual retail bank account Bitcoin account, like other currency?
So, and I wouldn't even say the future. You can do that now. You know, there's a lot of Bitcoin startups that are working towards providing merchant processing, so that you can do that. I don't know if you remember the scene in the movie, but where Bitcoin Jesus, he's showing the supermarket owner how he can accept Bitcoins if he wishes to. And there are companies that take the volatility out of the price, and by enabling him to do that, so that he doesn't have to worry about what the price of Bitcoin is. He can just accept Bitcoin. If you know, I want to walk into a store and say, here's Bitcoin, he can take it, but he never sees what the Bitcoin price is. It gets instantly converted by these merchant processors. So I don't know what region you live in or who the companies are, but I'm sure that they're there. And at this point, it's still early, so there's not many. But I think that's what we're seeing what's happening right now, is there's a lot of money being poured into the space, a lot of infrastructure being built. I think over the next couple of years, we're going to see a lot more of those companies, and a lot more people test this new currency to see if it can really work in a real way.
My question is more, the mainstream players now will adopt Bitcoin, or it's just